I didn't show you this little picture yesterday, but I present for like Heavy Duty Truck Magazine, a bunch of places around the country on DOT related stuff. And I presented for a company called Arrive Logistics out of Austin, Texas. They're a freight broker. And they found this picture online. I didn't even know it existed, but don't I look kind of psycho up there? So I don't know if I look like that yesterday, but hey, what it is what it is. So 20 years, again, I was a state patrol inspector for 12 years. So I pulled over trucks on the road and at scales for 12 years. Then I was an investigator with the federal government. Knocked on company doors and did full reviews from drug testing to CDLs to insurance, DQ files, hours of service, hazmat, vehicle maintenance, all of it, right? So I did that for 8 years. Then I was a hazmat guy with the FAA. I think I said that. I did some hazmat stuff. So 23 years government regulator. Just in case someone was here yesterday, 2 years ago, I started working for an insurance brokerage. So I sell commercial insurance packages, truck insurance, cargo, physical damage, workers' comp, all that. And I also do DOT consulting on this side for fees. If someone wants my consulting services, they can sign up their insurance, they get this for free. But enough about me. So this coercion rule, I had at first put this on the bottom, but I'm going to talk about it first because there are some people here that I met yesterday that don't have trucks, right? There's a few. A lot of you have trucks to some level, but some of you don't have any trucks. You have other companies come to your facility and you're a shipper, which is why FSMA applied yesterday. So I want to start with the coercion rule because the coercion rule is unprecedented. For the first time in the history of my career with the US DOT, the US DOT, not the FDA, which is what FSMA was yesterday, but the US DOT holds shippers, receivers, and brokers accountable for hours of service if that shipper, receiver, or broker coerces a driver to violate. I'm going to give you an example of that. So basically, those of you without a truck, you could be responsible for hours of service because of the ELD mandate where a driver could file a federal complaint against you and the government will come knock on your door and check to see whether or not you coerce that driver. Again, I'm going to give you an example. Then we're going to talk about safety management cycle. This is what FMCSA gives to companies to try to improve your safety culture. So I'm going to run through that. We're going to talk about the ELD then. The rule dates. We're going to talk about exceptions. How do you get out of it, right? We're going to talk about how the thing works, right? We have Fleet Maddox over here and some Samsara. If you haven't gone to the booths and you want hands-on, you want to see some ELDs in action, I know, is a Samsara guy in here and the Fleet Maddox person in here? Or are those booths over? They're not over, right?
They're not, no, they're open.
Yep, they're open today. Go see them. The Samsara guy actually has his computer there. He can pull up the interface for ELDs. And it gives you a real good idea of what all the devices have in the country to offer. And I'm not pushing that one. There's 150 devices in the United States. You have a lot of choices. All right, so how it works. Then we're going to talk about at roadside, what happens. Then we're going to talk about at your company level, what happens. This is if you're required to have them or if you're not required to have them. I'm going to explain what happens. Then there's some company policies. If you're required to have these, I'm going to give you guys some company policies that I would put in place to reduce the likelihood of getting sued, to reduce the likelihood of being subject to the coercion rule, et cetera, right? And then we're going to select an ELD. I'm going to tell you what you should watch out for if you need to go get one of these still. There's a lot of people that are waiting to the last minute. So, coercion rule, here's how it works. In January 2016, and I said 16, that was almost 2 years ago, the government published a rule called the coercion rule. There has already been 300 complaints by drivers under this rule. What does the rule say? It says that any threat by a motor carrier, which is the company with the truck. Now, when I say motor carrier, I don't mean trucking companies. If you hire someone to come pick up your freight, they're a for-hire motor carrier. If you have your own fleet of trucks, then you're a private motor carrier. So the only difference is you're a motor carrier. You're subject to hours of service, just like anyone else, except in one case you're for hire, the other one you're private. So motor carriers cannot threaten a driver. Shippers, which is a distributor, right? They can't threaten a driver. A receiver, the people receiving the goods, cannot threaten a driver, and neither can a broker. So now, that's one piece. You cannot threaten the driver. The second part is if you do threaten him, and he's over hours or he's violating any federal regulation, he has to have some level of business withheld or loss of work opportunity. So if you'd say to that company, Hey, if you don't do what I say, you're never coming back here again. That's a threat, right? Or if the driver's over hours and you say, you can't stay on my lot, I don't want the liability, get out of here. Right? So that would be a threat. Now, I'll get into this work opportunity here, but don't make threats against them that you'll withhold business. Now, you have to require him to violate a regulation. Just hours of service? No. Any regulations. So down here are all of them. Hazmat, drugs and CDL, vehicle maintenance, hours of service, driver qualification, it's all in there. So you mean to tell me a shipper and receiver are potentially responsible for every federal motor carrier regulation if you threaten a driver and make them do that, right? So, actual taking or permitting adverse employment action, etc. So now, what's a receiver? Anybody who takes delivery. That's a definition. What's a shipper? Anybody who tenders the property, puts it into transportation, meaning you put it on a truck. Broker is anybody who arranges for transportation. So we get that. That's who's subject. Now it says, motor carrier, these people may not coerce a driver. If the driver feels he is coerced, he can file a complaint with the federal government, and if documented, they can come in, knock on your door, and do an investigation. So pretend you're a distributor in the room with no truck, and a truck comes to your facility, and the driver ends up over hours, and he objects to this, and you do not heed to his objection, which is what it says, you're potentially subject to a complaint. Imagine an investigator from the federal U.S. DOT comes to a shipper and says, explain yourself. Fair enough? And we don't want that to happen. And why are we talking here today? I'm educating you on this rule so we can put stuff in place to mitigate, to reduce the likelihood of it happening to us. Do I want that to happen to anybody in this room? No. That's why we're here. So he can file a complaint. Now, in the rule it says, you, a shipper, receiver, or broker, may commit coercion if you fail to heed to the driver's objection, which means he has to object. That would require him to break the rules. So here's an example. And if you don't understand hours of service, you can try to follow along, interrupt me if you don't get it. So 4 a.m. is when both of these drivers started. This is a shipper of choice. This is not a shipper of choice. So this is a good shipper or receiver, whatever. This is a bad shipper. So at 4 a.m., this driver cannot drive past 6 p.m. That's the 14-hour rule. So private or for hire, needing a logbook or not, right? Even if you're a time card guy and you don't have an ELD, you cannot drive past this 14th hour is a general rule. So if you start at 6, you can't drive past, you start at 4, you can't drive past 6, sorry. So if you start at 4, 14 hours later is 6, you can't drive past 6. So this driver drove 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 hours, took a half an hour break, which is required, then drove 7, 8, 9, 10 hours. So he still has 1 hour left in his day in this scenario. Well, his delivery time was 2 p.m. You guys see that? He was required to be here at 2. This good shipper got him loaded in 1 hour. So now he can drive all the way up to this 6 o'clock. 11 hours of driving, 14-hour day. So in this case, he had 10 hours of driving. He still has another hour, but from this shipper to here is the truck stop. So I went here and now I'm at the truck stop, or I'm back to my company or wherever I am. And then I can take sleeper berth or off duty. So in this case, this driver did not violate. And he was there on time and you got him loaded timely. Now in this scenario, he gets there on time, but you hold him up for 5 hours. You're not accommodating him. Now at the end of that 5 hours, he's loaded and he's like, hey, listen, I can't leave your facility. I'm over hours. And this shipper says, that's between you and your company. Get out of here. I don't want the liability of you sticking around. Leave my property. Did he object? Yes. Did you heed to his objection? No. Did he violate the hours of service? Yes. Now, if he's on this 5-hour break at your facility because you held him up, and then he drives this half an hour, this is no longer a 10-hour break. So he needs to take another 10-hour break, and he loses that 5 hours of work opportunity. You guys see it? Or if you do have sleeper, which our guys probably don't much, you can add 8 right here of sleeper to 2 of this, but you still lose 3 hours. No matter what, in this bottom scenario, if you force the guy to leave over hours, you potentially will get a complaint from the federal government because that driver was coerced. Go ahead.
Just a quick question. So if you have a transportation company come to your dock, you load the trailer,
Mm-hmm.
If he starts his truck and just moves it like 10 minutes or 5 minutes around the building to get outside the gate, let's say, does that interrupt his, if he has an electronic log and stuff, does that interrupt that time period?
Yes. There are some provisions we're going to get into here where you as a shipper or a receiver or distributor can accommodate the driver and help him. But if the vehicle moves 5 miles an hour, it's going to put him into the driving status in your parking lot. If your parking lot is considered a yard by definition, which I'm going to cover, then he can pick yard miles in the ELD, which is a duty status selection, but he'll still be on duty. So if you took 5 hours right here and you drive in the shipper location in yard miles, it's going to bring you down to that bottom line, and this 5 hours is now broken. So drivers that are over hours and they've already spent 7 hours at your facility and you say leave, if he could stay 3 more at your facility, he gets his 10, then make him leave. And if you say, well, I don't want the liability of that, well, then get him out of there before 7 hours. You assume the liability for 7 hours when it was convenient to you, but when it's convenient for him to stay 3 more, you won't let him? That's kind of a jerk move, right? How about when he gets there, find out if he has enough hours. If he does, get him in and out of there quickly. Fair enough? Go ahead.
Yeah, so I know all that sounds a little obscure to what we're used to, the way we're used to operating, but these rules apply to everything. So the 14 hours, which John originally said driving hours, is actually hours of service.
Mm-hmm.
So they can't operate in one day, and when they leave your place and they can't get back, over 14 hours is against the federal regs now.
As a general rule, there's an exception to that I'll cover for the people. But so ultimately, before I get into the ELD and the hours of service, I wanted to give this coercion rule piece to the people in this room that don't have any trucks. Because then they're like, well, I don't have any trucks. What do I care about the hours of service? I don't have any trucks. What do I care about the ELD? If you're a distributor in this room without a truck, you need to accommodate the people that do bring trucks onto your facility, especially the ones with ELDs, because the ones with paper logs or time cards can lie for you, but the ones with ELDs can't. You get it? So I was going to do this coercion rule at the end, but I didn't want some of the distributors that don't have trucks to walk out of the room, right? I want them to stay. So go ahead.
Real quick, is it only the driver that can file this complaint?
Yes.
Say somebody's driving an ELD truck.
Mm-hmm.
All right, and management, who gets the information,
Yep.
can then request him to file it.
As long as the complaint is coming from the driver, he can file a federal complaint against a shipper, receiver, or broker. He can file it against the motor carrier. That was up there too. So now some companies that you may hire or whatever, I don't know, we're getting into the more of what you do with the ELDs. Some companies, a guy might only have one truck with one trailer, and he's a single guy owner operator and you contract with him. Well, the owner is the driver, right? All right, so any questions about that so far? Now, why do we have the ELD mandate? Before I get into why these computers are in the trucks, we have to understand this. In 2006, Robert Spencer was over hours, false, driving without a log, paper days, right? This happened in 2006. 1 second of him falling asleep, we will suffer the rest of our lives. Any guy can get tired and fall asleep. I don't care if it's a straight truck, I don't care if it's a tractor trailer, I don't care if it's a CDL straight truck or a small straight truck, right? Anything bad can happen. So he had driven when he was at least 9 hours over federal rules. 9 hours over federal rules. Who thinks that's a lot? In some cases, it's not. Because let's say you have an employee that drives your vehicles, right? And he takes a 10-hour break, and then he does a 13-hour day, and then that night, for whatever reason, he only gets an 8-hour break. But he said it was 10. Well, then he didn't get his 10-hour break, so the next day, every minute's over hours. You see what I'm getting at? What if you have a guy that has a part-time job at a bar and he drives your truck all day and then at night he goes and bartends? He said he got a 10-hour break, right? Bartending counts against his 10-hour break. He can't bartend at night if he's driving your truck during the day and you're subject to hours of service, because then he didn't get his 10-hour break. You get what I mean? Now, if you don't get your 10-hour break, then every minute tomorrow's over. So if you drive 10 hours today and 10 hours tomorrow and you crash at the end of tomorrow, you're 10 hours over. This guy was 9 hours over. So now it makes it seem like 9 hours over federal rules ain't a whole lot if you just don't get your 10-hour break. Go ahead.
What if you don't know they have a second job?
Here's the best thing to do. Ask them. when you hire the driver, have them fill out a form saying, if you have any secondary employment, you are advised you must notify us immediately and provide those hours to us. If you haven't asked them and he crashes and then they do an investigation and find out he bartended last night until 3 in the morning, came and drove for you at 6 a.m. and crashed into a little kid, what happens? An attorney's going to say, well, what did you do to verify this? What did you ask him? What if it's well known at the company and no one put 2 and 2 together? Because everyone knows he bartends. He talks about it all the time. Right? So you guys get what I'm saying. That's why it's important. Now remember Taylor University, it was in the news where 2 girls' identities got swapped because one girl landed on the other girl's purse and the parents buried the wrong kid. You guys remember that about 10 years ago? That's this crash. So that crash where the identities got swapped was Robert Spencer. Why am I here? Because I care about Robert Spencer. I want Robert Spencer to not have to go to prison for 8 years. He went to prison for 8 years, this driver. That's why the ELD is here, because this has been an epidemic of false logs, over hours, not following the rules, not taking your 10-hour break, etc. All right? So now, safety culture. I'll throw this out real quick though. Put policies and procedures in place regarding hours of service. Let's use the example you gave. Have a policy to ask him if he has second employment. What's his role? To notify you. What's your role? To listen and pay attention and apply those hours. Hire people that you don't believe need a second job. Pay them more money. That's a joke, you get it? Then they won't go get another job. All right, training and communication. I'm training you about this second employment. Go there and train your drivers, right? Monitoring and tracking. Go to the bar. That's a joke too, right? Go to the bar, see if he's working. All right, meaningful action. Don't buy a drink from him. Don't give him a tip. That's a joke too. But you see what I'm saying? You can use this in all aspects of your company, not just this one example, but everything, right? You can actually do it to raise your kids. Here, my daughter has a curfew at 11 o'clock on Friday, but she has to clean her room or she can't go out. And don't do drugs, don't drink, and don't be late, right? Role, she has to clean her room. Don't do drugs, don't drink, and don't be late. And don't get pregnant either. There's always adoption, and I mean putting your kids up for adoption. I'll teach her how not to do those things. Monitoring and tracking. I'll put like a piss kit and a breathalyzer and a pregnancy kit in the end table. So when she comes home, I'll be like, you ready? Right? Now that's a joke too. But we could use this in our daily lives. You get what I'm saying? But apply it to your companies, you see? All right, so now history of the the ELDs. Here's how it goes. In 1988, they wrote a rule called AOBRD, Automatic Onboard Recording Device, a voluntary computer to track hours of service. Over the years, since 1988, companies have put these in voluntarily. So then in 2010, 22 years later, they came out with this thing called EOBR1. EOBR1 was going to make a computer which is really AOBRDs on steroids, like with a lot of technical specifications, new technology. They're going to have that mandated for all the companies that had bad reviews when the government came and knocked on your door. Then they were going to do EOBR2, where they said, now we're going to have everyone else do it. This EOBR1 was a final rule. EOBR2 was a proposed rule. Right in here, OIDA, an independent group of truck drivers, right, association, sued the government and got EOBR1 thrown in the garbage. The government took EOBR1, EOBR2, added them together, you get what I'm saying? Pulled them out and did a supplemental notice of proposed rulemaking, adding them both together. Now, why did it get thrown out? Driver harassment. Driver harassment. Driver harassment. You cannot harass drivers with computers. If it's their 30-minute break, leave them alone. If they're on a 10-hour break, some of the systems will do a voiceover. He has the ability to mute it. So now they put things in the rule so you can't harass a driver. Interestingly enough, this is my opinion, if OIDA would have never sued over this rule and just let it go into effect, this one might never have happened. OIDA could have said, hey, only have it for the bad companies. We're a good company. Why do we have to put one in? But I can't predict if that's what would have happened. But I can tell you this, because this took so long, MAP 21 came out here and it mandated the coercion rule because of driver harassment. We wouldn't even have the coercion rule if they wouldn't have sued. Unbelievable, right? But now we have ELDs for everyone instead of just the bad ones. And we have the coercion rule thanks to a lawsuit. Crazy. All right, so then, 2015, this computer is now here. And the couple vendors over there have examples of them, but there's 150 vendors. Now, the ELD mandates here in 2015. What does that mean for us? You either need an AOBRD, the old device, or an ELD in your truck by this December unless you're exempt. I'll say it again. You need an ELD, the newer device, or the old one in your truck by this December 18th unless you're exempt. I'm going to cover exempt in a minute. Some of you will be exempt. All right, so now in 2019, if you have an AOBRD that has not been upgraded to an ELD, you got to throw the AOBRD in the garbage. And you must install ELDs. They will no longer allow AOBRDs past 2019. It's a grandfather. Fair enough? So now, what's the exceptions? 100 air mile radius. No more than 8 days in a 30-day period. I'm going to bring this home in a minute. Another one is drive away, tow away. Delivering new trucks. Delivering new trucks. Is a Great Dane guy in the room? Maybe not, but you know how Great Dane's selling a truck? If whoever's delivering that brand new truck to your facility, they're exempt. They don't need one because you're delivering a new truck. Why put an ELD in only to get there to yank it out? So they're exempt. Who else is exempt? Any truck that has a 99 engine or older. Does anybody here have a truck that is 99 or older? No ELD needed in that truck forever. Who has a truck that's maybe a 2002 but there's a 99 engine in it? Same thing. Go ahead. Yep, 99 engine. If you're going to use that exemption and it's not a model year 99, you have to have paperwork to support it at your company, not in the truck, to show it's a 99 engine. But if it's not a 99 engine and it ain't a brand new truck, the only other exception you have right now, for the most part, I'll get two more, is this top one. So what's the top one? Let's pretend everybody in this side of the room has a straight truck that requires a CDL. Now let's say everybody in this room has a straight truck that does not require a CDL. You guys get it. So your non-CDL straight truck's greater than 10,000 pounds, but less than 26. You guys are 26 and over. Fair enough? So we're going to ask you guys 5 questions first. Number 1, did you stay within 100 air miles of where you reported to work today? Yes. Let's just say yes. So it's where you start work, draw a big circle, stay in the circle. Next one. You have to leave and return and go home within 12 hours. Leave and return and go home within 12 hours to the same location. Let's say yes. Next one, you need 10 hours off between your shifts. 10 hours off today, 10 hours off tomorrow. Next one, you cannot drive more than 11 hours in that 12-hour period. Well, when's that going to happen, right? Last one is you need time cards, time start, time finish, total hours worked. Time start, time finish, total hours worked. Doesn't have to be a time card. You can literally grab a roll of toilet paper and write the date, time start, time finish, total hours of work, and hand the investigator the roll of toilet paper. But you have to keep those records for 6 months. Can you use a logbook, a paper logbook, as that time record and only capture time start, time finish, total hours? Yes. But we need to educate our drivers that they're exempt from a logbook today if you guys answer those 5 questions correctly. Now let's look at a 30-day period, because remember it said 8 days and 30 days? Here's how that works. In this side of the room, if all of you answer those questions correctly, those 5 right here, on a daily basis for 30 straight days and you never answer them wrong, you never need a logbook page at all, which means you don't need an ELD. Let's say the next 30 days, right? You answer those questions wrong 5 times. Is 5 more than 8? No. You still don't need an ELD. You have to fill out a paper log for those 5 days, but you don't need an ELD. The next 30 days, 12 times we answer those questions wrong. That means we needed a paper logbook 12 days. Is that more than 8? We better had an ELD in that truck for that driver for the whole 30 days. We got it? That's CDL. Non-CDL. Same questions except for it's 150 instead of 100. Non-CDL, you guys can go 150. And instead of leaving and returning and coming back within 12 hours, you guys can come back within 14 hours. And twice a week, you can come back within 16. You got it? So you can do a 14-hour day every day without needing a log, and you can do 2 16-hour days. Problem with the 16 is you still need 10 hours off. So if you started at 6 today and you do a 16-hour day, you can't start at 6 tomorrow. You have to wait till 8. You get it? Now, can you guys do a 14-hour day and not need a log? No. Can they? Yes. Do we see the difference? Now let's talk about staying within your state.
Does everybody understand the difference between a CDL and non-CDL requirement? It's weight-based.
Yep. The gross vehicle weight rating, you open up your door, and if it's greater than 26,000 pounds on a straight truck with no trailer, that's this. If it's 26 exactly or less, that's this. If it's 10,000 exactly or less, then it's neither of you. Drive as much as you want. You get what I mean? So, as much as you want, 10 or less. 10,001 to 26 exactly, that's you. 26 plus, that's you. Fair enough? Now, go ahead. Nope. He did not leave and return to the same spot, and both of these require that. So if he goes today and goes to a hotel, comes back tomorrow, he needs a logbook twice. Can you do that and still not need an ELD? Of course you can. Let's say that you were this group. Let's say you were this group again, and the whole month you answered them right, except one night you stayed in a hotel. How many days logs do you need if you stayed in a hotel one night? 2. Yesterday and today. Because both days you won't leave and return to the same spot. Fair enough? So 2 days, that's 2 out of the last 30. Is that more than 8? No, you're good. Now you better had 2 days paper logs, but you don't need an ELD. Now as a company, if you can monitor that activity, you're okay. But you better manage it. If this driver right here gets to his 8th day at day 22 and you have another trip to do, send this driver. Don't send this guy for how many days? About 8. Then you can start sending him again. It's a rolling 30 days, but you have to put that in if you want to take advantage of this. Now, state law. Some of you stay in the state that you're in, correct? John Seidl does not memorize state law. I can possibly know what your state says, but I'm going to give you Wisconsin, because I live in Wisconsin and I've worked there for 25 years, right? Here's what Wisconsin does. They say, we want to regulate hours within our state, but we don't want to start with a blank piece of paper. We want to use federal regulations. So here's what Wisconsin's going to do. They said, all right, you can drive, you have a 14-hour workday, and you can drive 11. 30-minute breaks required, 70 and 8 days is the hours of service for everybody in this room, right? That's federal. State says, here's what we're going to do. We're going to make it so these vehicles under intrastate, no hours of service. So this is what Wisconsin's doing. They're taking you and putting you with the group over there. But intrastate hours of service for this side, you still have them. But instead of 11 hours driving, you can do 12. Instead of 14-hour work days every day, you can do 16 every day. But you still need a 10-hour breaks, and then we have that other problem, right? Instead of 70 hours in 8 days crossing state lines, in Wisconsin, you can do 80 hours in 8 days. They give you 10 extra hours. So you see what Wisconsin has done. They've taken the federal hours of service, copied them, and tweaked them to make you guys exempt, to make you guys still subject, but with different rules slightly. What does Texas do? I don't know. What does California do? Beats me. What does New York do? They do the same thing as feds, period. They say, if you're 10,000, the same. They don't change anything. Illinois does the same thing. So you see, some states adopt the feds and call it state law. Now, will all states require an ELD? Don't know. Is Wisconsin? Yes. By what date? February 2019. How do I know this? I made some phone calls. So if you have operations within your state, please make some phone calls and figure out what your state does. Because you might need an ELD even if you don't leave your state.
So if you are respecting the federal law, and which one proceed? Let's say I'm in Texas. I do the Texas, but then Texas is different from the
Interstate.
and
Yep.
then how do you work that out?
In the regulation book, it's already clearly outlined that in a guidance question. Here's how it works. If I'm intra, I never leave the state, I'm in Texas. Now all of a sudden I go to Oklahoma today. Is that borders Texas, right? Oklahoma today. I'm interstate today. So instead of following Texas state law, before I cross that line, I got to go back to 70 hours and 8 days. Today I can only do 11. Today I can only do 14. I don't care what Texas said. Now they'll let you take Texas law and apply it for the last 7 days because you didn't know you were going interstate. You get it? But if you're at 73 hours in the last 7 days under Texas, which might have been legal, you can't cross state lines today because now you go back to the 70 rule. You get what I mean? Now, for the next 7 days, you have to follow feds. There's a guidance that says if you go interstate today, we're going to take the hours from the last week and apply it to interstate rules today. And then the next 7 days, you have to stay interstate. You can't go back to Texas law for a week after you cross state lines today. So you can't just jump back to Texas law. You have to wait a week. Fair enough? I don't mean to confuse you. What I want to do is educate you. This is the truth. And between FSMA yesterday and this, all I'm doing is the messenger, right? I'm trying to make us the most knowledgeable group in the United States regarding these two things. Do you have a question? You want me to keep going?
Just wanted to shoot you. You're the messenger.
I gotcha. All right, so how does this thing work, right? We should now have an understanding of whether we need this. Because I already went through who needs it, crossing state lines or not, size vehicles or not, and went through the exceptions. So now if nobody needs this, leave. I'm just kidding, that's a joke too. But how does it work? This is an Omnitrax IVG. It's probably the market leader in the United States. It plugs into the engine, okay? This is a dedicated computer. This is a tablet phone with a little puck that connects to the engine. But this connects to the engine, this connects to the engine. This is satellite. This obtains satellite locations. This obtains satellite locations. So you see what I'm saying? Whether you have a dedicated computer or a tablet puck system, both of those, are connected to the engine and getting satellite. So a driver will log in. Now the truck knows he's driving. He steps on the gas. In 5 miles an hour, it will put him in the driving status. If he stops, the engine will say, we stopped. In 5 minutes, if you don't push a button, it will default you to on duty, but not driving, which is line 4 of a log. So 5 miles an hour puts you in the driving status. 5 minutes of no movement will put you on duty. How do you end up in the sleeper berth or the off duty, which is the 2 lines that get you your brakes back? You have to push a button. The truck doesn't know. So what's absolute about these? Your driving line is a fact. Where you are is a fact. Everything else is still a paper log. It can be a lie. Fair enough? Because everything else is a driver entry. You can lie. So this then flows to the company in these reports. If you go to Samsara, he can show you the reporting that's online. In the room over there, if you want to see what this looks like. You're going to be bombarded today. Right? So when you're selecting a device, the better reporting over here, the better you can operate as a company, because it will allow for you to have operational efficiencies. It'll give you speed, hard braking, idle time, reefer temperature monitoring. If you can connect a reefer temperature monitoring system to the ELD or have it independent, it doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be connected. If you could do that, then you can go online and manage your entire company in one spot. Fair enough? All right, so that's how it works. You guys have any questions? Now here's the number one way to cheat them. Oh, actually, I have an example of that. Now, why am I telling you this? I'm telling you this so you don't let your drivers do it, because then it puts you in a liability position. I'm not telling you so you go out and cheat, because tell you what, the driver's going to figure it out anyway. How about we figure it out first? Kind of like with my daughter. Remember I said I had this piss kit and pregnancy kit and all that? Now, before she goes out, should I tell her they're there? Yeah, because I'm deterring her from trying it. Same with you. If I teach you how to falsify them, train your drivers. This is how you falsify them, and this is how we catch you. So don't try it, because I'll catch you. Nip it in the bud before it even starts. Fair enough? All right, so that's how this works. Roadside, pretend you're a State Patrol inspector now. You get pulled, we're going to go through all these. You're a State Patrol inspector. This is a display that the officer can look at. And he can go through and say, you're over hours. The driver has to be able to pull the info out of that and present it to the officer. If the officer knows how the system works but the driver doesn't, it's a missing logbook. Even though his logbook's in the system, he doesn't know how to show you, the inspector at roadside. He's in violation and out of service until he shows you. Fair enough? Now, that's a display. This is the only one in the United States that has a thermal printer with a display. The display is too small, but you can push a button and it prints 8 days of logs on a cash register receipt. And you hand the little register receipt to the officer. Now, why does the government allow for a display or a printout? Because of 150 devices on the certified list today, one of them prints. That one. And they've been around for a long time. Who's ever heard of Continental Tires? That's the parent company to this one right here. So 140 devices are these. This is one. Now, in addition to showing the officer, pretend you're an officer and there's 150 devices in the United States of America. You get it? How hard is that for an officer to figure out? So the government has programmed these devices and required them to be programmed universally. So you can export a data file and import it into eRods, which is a software program right here developed by the government. So I'm in my State Patrol squad, I pull you over. I don't want to look at your display. I say, email me, or it's got Bluetooth or USB or email and web. One of these two the vendor has to pick, and I'll tell you, 99% are doing this. Very few are doing Bluetooth, and because then the officer would have to bring his laptop in the truck, transfer it via Bluetooth, or use a USB stick. Nah. So they're doing it web and wireless for the most part. Fair enough? So I'm the officer. I go on the internet. I go into my email, and there's a file there. I take the file. I import it into this, and every one of the 150 vendors looks like what to me? That program right there. So I don't have to learn 150, do I? All I got to do is learn that one, upload the file. It reads them all universally. We're good. Fair enough? So now, if your driver cannot transfer the data file to the officer via web or wireless, or if he's like, I don't know how to do that, he's out of service and in violation. Gets tickets because he doesn't know how to transfer the data file. So number one, you have to show him the screen and then that. Let's say it malfunctions. If it malfunctions, one of three things has to happen. You have to reconstruct them immediately with paper logs you keep in the truck. That's hard to do for the whole 8 days. You could give them a GPS report, which is in the system, but that's hard to do. But let's say you could possess them. Let's say I call you and say, hey, I can't see the screen. Can you email them? He goes online and says, yeah, they're all right here. I'll print them and send them to you. And then I can print them and then possess them in my pocket. Then I'm good for the last 7. Then I fill out a paper log for the period that it's not working, because he doesn't have it, but he had my last week. Some of the systems, you'll be able to go in and say, oh, there's the last 8 days, but it's not working anymore. So you fill out a paper log because it's not working going forward, but you can access them through the system. So either reconstruct, possess, or access. How many days can you fill out a paper log if it malfunctions? 8. 8 days, that's it. So now vendors in the US, there are 150 vendors on the list. Do you know how many there were 5 years ago? 10. 140 people have got some technology, jumped into this game, and what do they really know? Not a whole lot. Are the devices compliant? Some not. On the list of 150 certified devices, it's a self-certification. So what I would tell you is buyer beware. I could put an ELD on the list within a week, and it could be BS ELD, if you get my point, right? Biosystems, what were you guys thinking? That's a joke too, right? All right, so these are the 3 things if it breaks down. You can get an extension, but I wouldn't rely on that. Now, personal conveyance and yard moves. That goes into what the guy over there said about you're at the shipper, you've been there 5 hours, and you need to move the truck a little bit. Fair enough? FMCSA is aware there's concerns about personal conveyance and yard moves. Some people want clear-cut limits about how far you can move and when and where, but we're not prepared to do that right now. We're going to give you a mandate that tracks every little movement of the vehicle, but we're not going to give you clear guidance as to when you can use it. That's what they basically said in a paragraph in the rule. Read it. It's crazy. Because there is some guidance, and here's what it is. Personal conveyance. Personal conveyance is where you can drive your truck. All of our drivers can drive our truck. And while we're driving our truck over 5 miles an hour, the ELD will record that time as off-duty. It will not record that time as driving because it's personal conveyance. You need 3 things for personal conveyance. Number 1, they're not working anymore. You're letting them use the truck to go to a truck stop or a restaurant or whatever. Example, let's say that they're at a shipper. And they're supposed to get loaded at this time, but they get held up but the shipper says, I can't load you for 5 hours, I'm backed up. That driver's been there for an hour already, started his 10-hour break, maybe 2 hours, and then they said, I can't get you to for 5 more hours. That's 7. But the driver doesn't want to sit at that shipper for 5 hours. He doesn't want to lose the 2 he already has. He's empty, he's not working. You can authorize him to drive 10 miles up the road to a truck stop. If he's relieved of work, he goes short distance, and he does not have any freight, meaning he's unladen, no freight. If you're at a receiver and get delayed, sorry, unless you throw the ice cream on the dock and leave, right? Or eat it. All right, so if you're not working, you go short distance, and you have no freight in there, you can drive while off duty and go to the truck stop and come back. you'll push personal conveyance in the ELD. How long has this guidance been in the regulation? For 20 years. Who cared about it before? Nobody. Why? Because you just lie in your logbook. Now you can't lie, so now everybody wants to use it. That's why we need clear-cut limits. Fair enough? Go ahead. Well, great question. I have about 12 memos from the government where they make it even more muddy, right? So here's what you do. You write a company policy that says this: you're relieved of responsibility and you can use personal conveyance as long as you don't exceed, fill in the blank. You choose as a company and say you're no longer relieved as long as you stay within, Now, if there's a special circumstance that you think is reasonable, you could say, other considerations past this mileage threshold will be handled on a case-by-case basis. It'll require you to call management, get approval prior to doing it. You get what I'm saying? If you want to limit it a lot, you can literally say, personal conveyance will be handled on a case-by-case basis. We will decide, call us. And when they call, apply circumstance. Ask them how far the truck stop is. Ask them how long they'd have to sit there. And use your own judgment. But this is it. If you want to add flexibility where this system now we live in is going to be inflexible, use this to your advantage. Fair enough? Next one. Yard miles. Yard miles is, let's say I'm at a Walmart distribution center. Do we ever go to something like that? Yeah. Perfect. You're at a Walmart distribution center. There's a fence around the whole thing and there's a gate where they check you in and out. That is a yard. You can push a button in the ELD and drive around over 5 miles an hour and not have it be driving. It'll be on duty. Now here's a caveat with hours of service. You're never over hours until you drive over hours. So what's your work day? 14 hours, right? If you get to a Walmart place at 14 hours exactly and you need to deliver in the next hour, you can push yard miles and drive around over 5 miles an hour to different docks and stuff. And it'll be on duty even though you're driving because you're in a yard. Now here's why the distribution center is a yard. You cannot use yard miles on a highway. I'll say it again. You cannot use yard miles on a highway. What is a highway by definition? It's a road or a street. We get that, right? But it's also a way. A way? Now this is the regulation. It's a way. Okay, it must be a way on public property, right? Not private. Nope. A way that is on public or private property. Great. Is the Walmart distribution center a way? Of course it is. Is it on private property? Yes. So far, it's a highway. Open to public travel? Aha. Is that distribution center open to public travel? No. Now it's a yard. And open to public travel means it's restricted by gates or prohibitive signs. Prohibitive signs. So now let's say you're at a shipper, or receiver, and there's no fence and no gate. You just drive back in their parking lot. Is that a yard? Not yet, because it's a way on private property. It's open to the public by four-wheel passenger cars. There's no restrictive gates. Is there prohibitive signs? Maybe not. If there's no trespassing sign or not open to public, if there's no sign anywhere, you need to give your drivers a sign. That's a joke. You get it? So he hangs it on the fence and takes a picture. No. You should educate your receiver that they should put signs up. Why? To add flexibility to our drivers. So your driver gets educated. He goes there. He's like, I want to use yard miles because it allows me to move when I'm over hours. Another over hours would be the 30-minute break. If you have a 14-hour day, you need a 30-minute break before the 8th hour. You see what I'm saying? That's hours of service. Well, let's say you get to the receiver at the 8th hour exactly. Wouldn't you want to maybe work to the 9th hour and then take the 30-minute break at the 9th hour? That's legal because between the 8th and 9th hour you didn't drive because you picked yard miles. You get it? So that's yard moves and personal conveyance. So personal conveyance is driving your truck over 5 miles an hour in the off-duty status as long as you met those elements. Yard moves is on a non-highway driving your truck, right, on a yard, which is on duty, not driving. Every other situation is driving if your vehicle's moving. Period, case closed, right? All right, go ahead.
Is there an exception for cancel malfunction? So the driver's over an hour, but it's reduced rates? You have to get to a shop to get repaired?
Over hours. Mm-hmm. And here's the deal. No, in reality, what would you do? You'd probably go to the shop. Let's just be real here. Here's the problem of inflexibility with the hours of service. Now, if your association wants to jump on the bandwagon of every other association in the country, we need to fix the hours of service. The ATA and OIDA, I just did a presentation and they both were there. And the ATA is like, we love ELDs. ATA is the American Trucking Association. OIDA is like the independent operators, like, we hate ELDs. And I listened to their rhetoric and they were both like on opposite sides of the world. But they both said one thing that was exactly the same. Drivers don't have enough flexibility with the current hours of service, and now they have ELDs. Now they have to follow the rules, and the rules are inflexible. Why did no one care about the inflexibility of the rules before? Because we just didn't follow them. Now we have to follow them, and now everyone's like, these rules suck. Well, why didn't you fix the rules? So I wish OIDA and ATA would unite and join forces with all the other associations in the country and say, Congress, enough, or FMCSA, enough. We need some help. And there's options. I'm not going to go into it today. I know how I would fix the rules because I have a fix, and it's not in place. And I worked for the government for 20 years, and I preached these fixes. They didn't listen to me. I wasn't high enough on pay scale. All right, so with the ELD, you get pulled over. This is all the information we need. Most ELDs will pre-populate it all, except for you're going to have to manually enter shipping ID and manually enter the trailer number if you have a trailer. The truck number will automatically populate. So this is what your driver is required to put in his header. You have to have an instruction card and user manual and 8 days blank set of logs in the truck. The #1 cited violation in the whole United States for people with computers tracking hours of service is this one. Get the instruction card and the logs in the vehicle and discipline drivers if they don't have it. If you want to go crazy, paint the instructions on the side of the truck. And then paint 8 days logs and give them a dry erase marker. You get it? Because then you're never missing them. Right? You know what? I have signs I made up from the sign association. No, that's another association. It's a joke. All right, so instruction sheet has to show how to transfer and what to do in a malfunction. A company with 500 trucks that I'm aware of, all their violations, because they have AOBRDs, they have computers and they've had them for 5 years. All these violations are pretty much blank set of logs, no instruction card. That's what they're getting caught for. This trucking company with 150 trucks doesn't have any computer violations, so they have a bazillion over-hours violations. This is the data that prompted the ELD plus the fatalities. Now, what do you do at the company level? Crazy. This is a company. This truck, 3373 truck in October of 15, it's a true story. Drove from Ohio to Pennsylvania while logged off. Let's say I'm in Indianapolis as an example and I need to go to Chicago, right? And I'm at my maximum hours, but I need to deliver the ice cream, right? For whatever reason, I need to go there. So I log off the device. I go, the device is connected to the engine. It's connected to satellite. There's a report that says this truck moved from Indianapolis to Chicago, but there was no one driving it. So then they tell the company, here's the data. Figure out who was driving it. Well, this company had the data, and when I grabbed 3373 and I went in on that date, this truck went from midnight Lima, Ohio to 9:31 Reading, Pennsylvania, which is 518 miles. So it drove 518 miles right here, then logged in and drove all day, then hit 14 hours, clicked a 16-hour exemption, and ran almost 24 hours in a day, and they had a computer in their truck. Crazy. Easy to get caught? Yes. With paper, how did you catch this guy? Didn't. He just did it. Are they doing that today? Yes. Are they driving around you on the interstate? Yes. Are they going to stop doing it soon? Mostly yes. But what happens to our freight rates? It's a whole nother story. A whole nother presentation I could do, right? So that's that. Oh, and then he didn't fill out his document number. Now here, see this weight ticket? I don't know if you guys ever weigh out like at a CAT scale or something like that, if it's ever happened. But these weight tickets in the country have black boxes on them where the time is on the front copy. Why did CAT scale design a box with little dots on it? To obscure the time nationally? To help drivers lie. Get it? Everybody's in on it. When you go to a truck stop, fuel island with your truck, are there times on the receipts in an interstate truck stop like a Petro or a Flying J? Nope. Why don't they put times on it? They'd go out of business if they had times on it. Because you can't lie as easy. Go ahead.
At some point, can you talk a little bit about CSA?
Yeah, a little bit. I can at the end. Yep. I told you 5 miles an hour is where the thing puts you in there. Now messaging. A lot of these systems have messaging where you can send messages to your drivers like, hey, I have a temperature monitoring system in the truck and I'm watching it online and the temperature's starting to drop. Can you pull over and check the reefer? Sounds great, right? You can send him a message. If he is off duty on his 30-minute break or his 10-hour break, he cannot send repeated messages to you. If he sends more than one message during a break, he loses that break. When the driver's on a break, leave him alone. Leave him alone. And now if you're going to do it, call him, right? That's a joke too. Because, you certainly don't want a record electronically of communication that's work-related during his break. Because what does that do? It puts you in a lawsuit situation. You run over a kid with one of your trucks, you kill him, and they come in discovery and subpoenas and they get your messaging records, and it showed that during his 10-hour break he was talking to you all the time about what he's supposed to do, right? So messaging. Drivers have to be able to edit these. If they make a mistake, they can edit them. You just can't edit driving because that's the automatic piece. You can make mistakes on the rest of it. All right, let me see here. Out of service criteria. Driver out of service beginning 4/1. Now I told you need one of these by December. You can be in violation this December. You will start getting tickets. You'll start getting roadside violations. And whoever hasn't heard of CSA, CSA is when the government pulls you over and you get violations, they give you points. You get it? So now let's just do this for giggles. There's 5 of you in a row. Well, we'll pretend he's not getting up, right? Oh, I just busted him out. See, now he's leaving and everybody's looking at him. Sorry about that, man. Oh, it's all good. So 5 people are in this row, right? In CSA, the government breaks you into peer groups. 1 truck, 15 trucks, 50 trucks, 2,000 trucks, 17,000 trucks. You see what I'm saying? So they don't compare the 17,000 guy to the guy with 1 truck. It's not fair. So now let's say me and you both have 1 truck. And you have been pulled over 5 times. I've been pulled over twice. Who has more points? He does. Whoever has more points gets visits from the government. Whoever has more points gets higher insurance rates. Whoever has more points, when you do run over a kid, they're going to bring that up and hold it against you. So you do not want to get pulled over and get CSA points. You will get points starting this December. Who's ever been pulled over and you get a little inspection and you get points on your CSA? It's public record. You can look at them. Now, this is an out of service. December, you'll get points. You won't be shut down. Starting in April, they're going to put you out of service. If you don't put an ELD or have an AOB by this December, I'm going to give you a ticket. I'm going to give you a violation, but you can drive down the road. 3 days later, you get pulled over again. You get another ticket and another violation. You can drive down the road. 6 days later, you get pulled over again. You get another ticket and another violation. You can drive down the road. In April, I pull them over. Here's your 4th ticket. You can't drive down the road. You're now out of service until you bring one to the scale and install it right here. I'm going to give you 90 days to keep getting CSA points and tickets, but then after that, you're going to install one in front of me. Crazy, right? So, failure to transfer the data, violation in December, out of service in April. Using an exempt category that you don't meet the 8 times a month, violation in December, out of service in February. Failure to reconstruct when it breaks down, failure to fill out a paper log, violation December, out of service April. Failure to get it repaired in 8 days, violation, out of service. Failed to log into it, producing a false log, like the example from Pennsylvania, right? Violation, out of service. Required to have one, and you didn't put one in. Violation the 3 times, 4th time, out of service. What do you have to do at the scale? Install it. Do I believe some drivers will do something foolish like this? They'll put one in there, and then they won't use it. And when they get pulled over, they'll take their ticket. This is after April. Take their ticket, take their CSA points, then turn it on, use it to leave the scale, and then turn it off and never use it again. Is that going to happen? I'm sure. Now, is this going to be the majority of the country? No. Are there going to be some renegade people that don't have advanced safety cultures that are going to do this, and then when they crash, they get sued, and then maybe they go to jail, right? Of course. So, policies to implement. You need a personal conveyance policy. If you don't have one because you don't want them to go to a truck stop, let's picture this. Let's say that you get to the shipper, and remember that shipper of choice? Let's say you get to the receiver. Let's say you get to the receiver at the 12th hour at 2 o'clock. He gets you out in an hour, you drive to the truck stop, it's all good. But now let's say you go to the receiver, and he's taking all the ice cream off your truck, but you're at the 17th hour, remember? Are you working anymore? No. Is the truck stop a half an hour away? Yes. Are you unladen? Yes, you're at a receiver. You just gave them your freight. If you have a personal conveyance policy, you could say this. You can use personal conveyance, but only when forced to leave a location empty at a receiver. You see what I mean? Allowing your driver to be forced to leave your customer and drive to the truck stop. But put that in policy. So no matter what, you need a personal conveyance policy, but you may only do it in a forced to leave a location policy. This is tied to the coercion rule. So have a policy. What I would tell you is if you're forced to leave loaded, let's do this again. You're forced to leave loaded, but you don't want to file a coercion rule against your receiver because it's your customer. You get it? So you're going to discourage your driver from doing it. But protect you and him. Have your driver send a message and say, hey, I talked to, is it Ozzy? I talked to Ozzy at this receiver, and she told me to get out. I was loaded. I said I can't. She said I don't care. Send a message saying, Ozzy told me to do that. Then 2 days later, another driver, Ozzy told me to do it. And in 6 months, she told 78 times, 12 different drivers to leave loaded. You get what I'm saying? Now, the 79th time, I run into a kid and kill him. And it's Obama's grandchild, right? Now the national news is here. You see what I mean? Now the NTSB is going to investigate. And Ozzy's going to be like, I never told him that. You're a liar. Because in the last 6 months, we sent messages. And I have 12 people to testify. You clearly told him to leave over hours. Who is going to be in big trouble? Yes. And from a liability standpoint, I don't want to bust out my receiver who's my customer today. But now that I'm facing a $50 million lawsuit, I'm going to be like, it's her fault. Right? In court. So have a force to leave a location policy to protect you. Yard miles, have a policy. Messaging, have a policy. Driving under the 5 miles an hour. You know what I fear? You got 2 delivery locations, right? Yeah, 2 delivery locations. And one is in this parking lot, then you have to go on a street in the same industrial park to go to the other one. You get to the first one, you're over hours, you drive at 3 miles an hour to get to the other one. You stayed under 5, it doesn't move you to the driving line. Because the GPS report will show that you moved. But the log won't. These vendors, they set the minimum is 5. They can set it at 0. I recommend 0. Because under what circumstance should your driver be driving around at 3 miles an hour to stay under the 5 to circumvent the hours of service to go to the next place? That's dangerous. Right? Dangerous, right? Discipline policy. You need to hold people accountable. Use that little safety management cycle thingy. Selecting a device. This list right here, view the certified list. It's on the website. There's 150 devices. Remember, I can put BS ELD on there? Be careful, buyer beware. This is some of the displays. The driver will interact with this part of it. You guys get what I'm saying? That's the displays. They're different options. The company interacts with this part of it. Everybody in this room is going to spend more time where? In the truck interacting with the display, or on the management side using this data to help you be more efficient in your operation. I would say the data is more important to a company than the ELD interaction in the truck, because you're going to get the logs on this side. So when you buy a device, do not buy a device by how pretty the tablet looks. Do not buy a device by how nice the little screen looks. Buy a device based on what the functionality of the back office end is. And I'm going to tell you right now, 5 years ago, there was only 10 of them. In the last 5 years since this mandate, not even 5, 3, 2, right? They just started getting into the back office support and understanding trucking. You see what I mean? Like, I'm not knocking, what's it called, Samsara? I thought it was a pretty nice device, but they've been running ELDs in the ELD market for 3 years. So I hope they have a trucking expert and an hours of service. I hope they have someone that has really made their system awesome. So I'm a little more skeptical about someone who just got here a year ago. And I'm not endorsing them because I thought it was a kind of a nice device, right? But buyer beware. If they're brand new, be a little more cautious. If they've been around for 15 years, think about it a little more. But that doesn't mean you can't go with brand new, but just be cautious. When it comes to meeting all the technical specifications, I know that there's at least 30. Here's a great example. You know how it had that puck with the tablet? The puck has to get the GPS location. That's required. I know personally there's 30 of them on the list where the GPS comes from the tablet. That's not legal. They've self-certified and they're getting the locations from the wrong place, right? Because if you log off, you know how you have that unidentified trip, which is a false? If you log off the tablet and that's the locations and then you come back and log in, it'll have the engine data in the box, but the locations won't be. So when you accept the trip, it won't have any city-states. How is that a malfunction? That's a programming problem. So beware of that. All right, installation. This is the old OmniTrax. It took an hour and a half to install. PeopleNet today takes an hour and a half to install. They got bought out by another company. This one takes 15 minutes to install. Fleetmatics, the one that's here yesterday, takes a long time to install. The Samsara takes probably 15 minutes. But what do you get? You might get better connectivity with the Fleetmatic. You know what I mean? So you have to figure out weigh maintenance versus connectivity, durability, all that stuff. This is the little puck I was talking about. So this has to garner the GPS location and some don't. You guys want to hear something funny? We're good. What are some drivers going to do in the United States? And we won't because this would be on us. They'll run one puck called Zeta Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday with a cord. Then they'll run Samsara Thursday, Friday, Saturday. So the driver will go 4 days with one, accumulate enough hours, and then take the puck out and put another puck in, grab a different app on his phone, and run 3 more days. Legal? No. Now, how did I knew that was going to happen. I didn't think drivers were onto it yet. I wasn't positive about that, but I went to the Journal of Commerce Inland Distribution Conference last week, and the guy from Red Dog Radio, the commentator's been doing trucking for 30 years, he goes, can you explain to them how they can run 2 devices? And I'm like, oh, they figured it out before the mandate even came, you know, because he talks to individual drivers all the time on Sirius Radio, right over. So I was like, ah. Now, additional value adds. Speed gauge, Lytx drive cam, temperature monitoring, right? Dispatching systems. Don't just buy an ELD for ELD. If you're going to invest capital money into technology in your truck, find something that maybe can connect reefer temperatures. But even if not that, don't think that you have to have an ELD that is integrated with reefer. There's reefer units on its own where you can get a little thing and track it and then go online, etc. See what I mean? But make your decisions. But I'll tell you, if you're a large company, dispatching systems are nice. Tracking speed is speed gauge. A lot of value adds. So again, this is me. I was supposed to go until 10:30. And 9 to 10:16, so we have 14 minutes for questions or we have snacks. Anybody have any questions? Go ahead.
I'm concerned about how many children you're running over.
I'll tell you, you know why I use children? Because what are the hours of service, and this is crazy, what's the hours of service for you people in this room? 11, 14, 30-minute break, 70, and 8 days, right? And even if you don't need a logbook, you still have to follow those hours of service. Let's just get that straight. Then state has hours of service, but in 2003, the hours of service were different. Who was here earlier than 2003? In 2003, instead of 11, it was 10. Instead of 10 hours off, it was 8 hours off. Instead of a 14-hour day, it was a 15. Instead of going from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m., the 15 just stretched until you accumulated enough work time. It could have been over 28 hours. That's how it was prior to 2003, right? An entire industry in the United States still follows those rules. In 2003, they changed ours to the 11s, the 14, the 70, and the 30-minute break. But an entire industry, because of the inflexibility of the product, like yours, right, fell under a different rule set, which is the old one. Guess what industry that is? Motor coaches. If you're a Greyhound bus or you're a motor coach and you're going on a motor coach trip, they don't follow the same rules as us. They have less strict rules. The old ones. You transport old people, because no kids are in a motor coach. You transport old people, and you can use the old, easier, more flexible rule set. You transport ice cream, and you have the hardest hours of service in the United States. Now, what's the most precious commodity in the United States? You guys know because kids eat ice cream. Kids are the most precious commodity. Who would disagree with that? The reason I say that is, let's say I'm driving down the road, and there's no offense here. You're younger than him, and my brakes failed. And I got to run one of you two over, I'm running over him. Because he's less precious of a commodity than she is. No offense. But he's closer to the end of it. You know what I'm saying? That is it. So I would rather die than my kid. You see what I'm saying? What's the hours of service for school bus drivers in the United States of America, including intrastate? None. You can work second shift at your distribution center then third shift at your distribution center, and then go straight home and deliver kids in a CDL school bus. That is legal. So why do I talk about kids? Because I find that to be the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my life. If anything, give us no hours of service. Let the passenger motor coaches stay the same, and give the school bus drivers those. But why can't they do that? Because what do school bus drivers make? $9 an hour? You transport the most precious commodity. You're a professional driver. You make less money if you deliver kids and you have no hours of service. No seatbelts either. Right? It's crazy. All right, any other questions? Go ahead.
If, for example, Walmart says if you deliver after 2, we are not going to receive it. Is this part of the putting pressure on the driver?
Let's say that the driver gets to the facility, and if you don't get there by 2, your driver goes there and they just say, go away and come back in 10 hours or 12 hours or 11 hours because they know there's a truck stop 15 minutes away. You're not coercing the driver into violating because when he got to you, he wasn't in violation.
Well, they have a set policy.
Yeah.
They do not receive from anybody after 2 o'clock.
Okay, so don't go there after 2.
Right.
Now, let's say you get there at noon and it's on time. And after 2, they won't receive anymore. And at 2, they tell you to leave. And you're over hours. Then that driver can file a coercion rule against a Walmart. Now, do I want a driver to file a coercion rule complaint against Walmart and sue them? Yes. I want that. Because C.H. Robinson, Google this. If you Google C.H. Robinson lawsuit, C.H. Robinson got sued about a decade ago for hiring a crappy trucking company. They lost $19 million. And you know what that did to the broker community in the United States? Made them vet trucking companies. What will happen when the first major person, Walmart, as an example, gets sued because they violate a driver's rights and force him under the coercion rule and he can't stay, and that driver sues him for intentional infliction of emotional distress and PTSD, right? How much are they going to pay? A lot. Will that hit Heavy Duty Truck and the Ice Cream Association magazines and all that? Yes. Now, what are the Walmarts of the world going to do? What? I've never heard of that. Now, have you heard of the coercion rule? Yes. You know how it works? Protect us. And if you want to, try to protect Walmart. Educate them. Now, I'll tell you, and it stays in the room, does Walmart have a history of non-accommodating drivers in the United States? Yes. How does Costco do it? They're so good to drivers. So, who do I love? Costco. Who do I kind of get pissed at in my head? Walmart. Because they don't accommodate drivers. And what's funny is, does Costco have a fleet of 8,000 trucks with their own employees called drivers? No. Does Walmart? Yes. You employ 8,000 people and you're inflexible to the non-drivers that you don't employ when they come to your facility. Shame on you, right? You get what I'm saying? So do shippers and receivers need to change their ways in the wake of the ELD? Yes. If you don't want to do it for the driver, do it for the coercion rule. Will Walmart be susceptible? Yes, they have deep pockets too. So I hope Walmart's listening. Are they here? All right. So you guys, any other questions? Keep going. Go ahead. Team drivers? All right. Team drivers, the ELD should not affect them at all. Because in a team situation, you're driving and you're driving, right? You have to have a sleeper berth though. You can't have team drivers in a day cab. It's got to have a sleeper. So while you're driving, he's in the sleeper. While he's driving, you're in the sleeper. You can drive that truck and never stop. So if you drove for 8 hours straight, and then you drive for 8 hours straight, and then you drive for 8 hours straight, and you drive for 8 hours straight, well, no, let's just do this. Let's say 10. So you drive for 8, take a 30-minute break, drive for 2, and then he does the same thing. You can keep doing that, and the truck could go from New York, California, and back, and never stop until you guys hit your 70. Fair enough? Now, if you are, this is the only time you can edit driving. If they're logged in both, one's a co-driver, and you forget to switch your IDs, but you both agree, you can swap your time in the truck. If you mutually agree. You can edit driving time in teams. Now, one thing about teams you need to know is you don't have to spend 10 hours in the sleeper while the other guy's driving. If you spend 8 in the sleeper, you can go in the passenger seat up to 2 hours immediately following the 8 in the sleeper. Fair enough? Does that answer your question? Good. Anyone else? I hope you guys got value out of the FSMA and the ELD. Anybody have any FSMA stuff? Go ahead.
Why the CSA? So, I'm not sure if everybody in the room realizes it, but if you have, how many trucks do you need to have on the road to be registered with the CSA?
One.
Right.
If you have a US DOT number, you're subject to CSA. That's why I used our example. If you have one driver and one truck, and I have one driver and one truck, and here's kind of how it works. Let's say hours of service. The threshold for us is 65%. Think of every truck in the United States that has one driver. 35% of them are in an alert status in CSA, because 65% are okay, 35% aren't. No matter what. You know how with basketball, like if I score 100 points and you score 98, I won, correct? Now the next game, you step it up, you score 110, but I got 120. I still won. That's how CSA is. It doesn't matter how many points you have. How many points do you have compared to everybody else? And you don't want points. So it's kind of opposite of basketball. It's like golf, right? You don't want points. So 35% of the companies have to be in the alert status based on the methodology of CSA. So 3 out of every 10 one-truck operations in the country have to be in the alert status.
So everybody in this room that has at least one truck that's registered with DOT as a DOT number is registered with CSA. And I didn't realize when I was running smaller operations, when we had about 9 or 10 trucks. But if you go on, you'll see you have a rating. It's unbelievable. They know that. They know every time your guy gets pulled over.
It's open to public record.
Guy got pulled over. It's on your record. It's amazing what the government's doing.
Driver meeting, driver meeting, driver meeting. Train your drivers. Orientate them properly. Bring them on the CSA. Show them how the scores work. Go ahead.
So to create a policy for the company, does the insurance companies have experts like you to help the companies to do that?
The only one in the United States that has experts like me is ours. I work for Integrated Risk Solutions. That's my number. That's our website. Are there other besides me? Yes. Are there some good brokers? Like some of your brokers, your agents, have risk people at your facility. Are they really me? Probably not. Are they going to bring you value? I'm not going to tell you that I'm the only one that can bring you value, right? I'm available, but use your broker. Now, if you're a small company, a lot of times they don't want to allocate a resource to you because you're not big enough. They don't pay enough premium. Like, you're a bigger company. I'm sure you've had people come visit from the insurance company. Some of you have never even seen your agent, right? You've probably never talked to him because he may give you your renewal via email. You get what I'm saying? That's not a value add, right? Now, for a 2-truck operation, am I going to fly to Texas? No. There's not enough commission in it for me. Will I fly if you pay me a little? Sure. But if you've got 40 trucks, there's enough commission. I'll fly to Texas once a year, do a safety meeting. I don't care. But I'm not the only one in the country, so good.
So one of the things that confuses me though is like the law hasn't been finalized, right?
Mhm.
Like
Well, what, you mean the ELD?
It was like the ELD, like it's like 0.95 or that's what I get.
Okay. Here's the way it is. The law is finalized. It was written in 2015. It's 168 pages. I've read it about 500 times. I'm on contract with 10 ELD vendors. I'm helping them get their device legal to put it on the list. You see what I mean? Now, what they don't have is sometimes the government changes their minds. Sometimes they change the intent of the rule that's written. For example, from December 15 with the ELD all the way to about 2 months ago, it was truck model year, 99 or older. 2 months ago, they said, we meant to say engine year. Why engine year? Because there was an issue with reading the data ports that come out of the ECM from a technical standpoint, and trucking companies have things called glider kits. Glider kits, like semis and even bigger trucks, you can have a 2015 model year with a 99 engine to circumvent California emissions. You get what I'm saying? So they had to change it because the 99 engines might not be able to read the data files in the ECM, and that was why they said 99. It wasn't 99 just to throw a number out. They don't want to promote using old trucks. It was the engine data, and it was really the 1.5 OBD versus the 2.0 with smaller trucks, like a Ford or whatever.
The OBD is the jack in the truck.
Yeah. OBD 1.5 and 2.0 is for smaller vehicles like Econolines and maybe the ones that this Great Dane selling smaller non-CDL trucks. The bigger ones are 6 and 9 pin, right? So just to give you an idea. So will there be changes? Yes. Example, this is a good time. I forgot to say it, and I wanted to earlier. I told you the 3 exceptions. There's 2 more. They're not in the rule. people have petitioned for exceptions now. The world is lighting up with exception requests right now. One was livestock haulers got an extension through the THUD bill because of lobbyists lobbied Congress, and the THUD bill is an appropriations bill, and they extended the mandate for livestock.
Doesn't help us.
But what I'm saying is they're a bigger association than you, right? So they paid somebody to get it into a bill to extend it. TRALA, the Truck Rental and Leasing Association. Here's a good one. Let's say that you guys never have a truck, but you're going to rent a truck for 3 days. A little reefer straight truck from somewhere, you're going to rent it for 3 days. If the rental is 8 days or less, any rental 8 days or less, you can run paper in that. Even if, remember we said more than 8 days in a 30-day period you need an ELD? Let's say you need an ELD 20 days in a month, because every day you work 14 hours that you work, right? So you need an ELD every day, but your truck breaks down, and you go rent one for 7 days. You can run paper in this one for 7 days. That was an exception that was just granted 3 weeks ago. So are there unanswered questions? Sure. Are there going to be changes? Yes. Kind of like what you said with FSMA. It's so new. Both of these are like that. So you could give me a scenario I might not have the answer to yet because they haven't come out with guidance for it. So I hope that helps. Anyone else?
Well, I just wanted to say something. You know, John, I appreciate the job you did today. I think it's a lot of good information for us in the distribution channel. Well, John mentioned several times in the past 5 years, they went from 10 manufacturers of this technology to now there's 150. We have 2 of them here. The reason they went from 10 to 150 is because the market for this technology has grown because everybody has to have it now.
Yeah.
I mean, if there wasn't so much of a demand for virtually every truck that's a CDL and in some cases non-CDL, there wouldn't be 150 companies selling this now. So that's one thing. And then the other thing about CSA, which I didn't, you know, when I was running the smaller fleet, I didn't realize, but the government knows about all of us. I mean, it's amazing. You know, you think, well, I have 5 trucks, they don't know. You have a CS, you have a DOT number, you're registered with CSA, you're registered with the government, they're going to pull your trucks over, they will, and they're going to come to your place one day and do an audit. And if you're not doing everything right, you're going to get fines. Once again, based on your size, the fine amounts will be different. But it's a huge deal.
I'm going
Like your insurance goes.
to throw an example with insurance. You know, sometimes you might need an excess policy because your customer wants excess to protect themselves. If you want like $5 million excess, that excess is on the rise. I have an excess market right now that says if you got a visit in the last 12 months and had adverse findings during a compliance review, you're not eligible for our excess program. And if you have 2 alerts or more, you're not eligible. So if you have little triangle alerts, one of the 35%, or you got a review and had some bad stuff, because what if they come knock on your door because of hours of service and find out you don't have a drug program? And just let you know, everybody on this side of the room, you need a DOT drug program. It's the #1 cited thing in the United States of America. You need a DOT drug program for every CDL driver that jumps in the CDL truck for you. And one little caveat, this is bonus material. January 2020, they have something called the Drug and Alcohol Clearinghouse, and we all have to change our drug and alcohol policy. Every one of us have to add section number 12 to our DOT drug and alcohol policy by January of 2020. What do I say? Change it now, put a little sheet on the front saying effective that date, this new section applies. Then when the day comes, rip the sheet out and the section's already written. Start educating them now. You see what I'm saying? What is the Drug and Alcohol Clearinghouse? Right now, if you have a CDL driver and you come to work for me, you do a pre-employment, right? And then you have to do background checks to make sure you didn't test positive. Well, guess what? If you test positive on a pre-employment, I'm the employer, I got to send your record to the clearinghouse. If you work for me and you go apply over there and you fail their drug test, you come back and keep working for me, she'll report you to the clearinghouse. And guess what I have to do every year as your employer? I got to send all my CDL guys annually with an inquiry to the clearinghouse to see if you went and got a job, tried to apply somewhere else, failed, and it's in the database. So everybody's going to have to start, no, not you. Everybody on this side of the room is going to have to start inquiring to the clearinghouse in 1 year and 6 months, every single year for every one of your drivers, to make sure there isn't a positive or a refusal somewhere else. And you're going to have to start reporting positives and refusals to the database. If I'm an investigator, I come knock on your door and say, hey, you have her and she tested positive on a random and you terminated her. She's not in the clearinghouse. Did you report it? Say no. Here's your $2,000 fine for not reporting it. That's coming in 18 months. So there's bonus material. Any other questions? I appreciate your guys' time. I've enjoyed this. Thanks for your hospitality. I am leaving in the next 15 minutes because I got to go to the airport. So.